This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We're all here, and we all love Drupal. We're recording this live on a Wednesday afternoon in a Google Hangout. Today is February 13th, 2015, and this is episode 85. We're talking about the flag module. Welcome, guys.
Hey there.
John always gives that look when I give that odd intro. So welcome. Here we are. It isn't a Wednesday. That's what the look is for. It is actually a Friday.
Don't worry. It was for multiple things.
Yeah, it was. Okay, so anyone who watches the video and listens to the podcast will notice that we always re-record the intro on the audio for iTunes and for the MP3 file, so it always sounds the same, always has the same language. On the video side, I don't quite do the same, and there's no music here.
It's like the premium feed if you get it on iTunes.
Yes, exactly. If you want the music on the intro and outro, you need to go to the MP3 file.
I thought the premium version just didn't have John in it.
That's right. We just blank them out.
Steve tweaks his intro immensely for the audio, iTunes version.
Yes, that's right. So welcome, guys. We have Jason Palmental from HW Design? Question mark? Hi, Jason.
It is kind of a question mark because today is sort of the last day that I'm really doing anything as H&W Design. It's kind of a big change. Ellen and I decided that we were going to try something new. We love working together, but we were just having a hard time managing projects and life and everything else. So I will actually be starting next week at Fresh Tilled Soil up in Boston as their lead UX strategist. And Ellen is going to be working with John over at Oomph as project manager.
So you guys have decided to do what it is you do best and focus on that.
Yeah, that's we had an amazing experience. We worked together for 4 years, and we would love to do that and continue to do it. But working on the Yale project really taught us that we loved working on big challenges, and that's really hard to maintain a steady stream of big challenges with a two-person company.
Right.
And so this will let us kind of just focus on doing work that we love to do, and kind of let the business part go to someone else. And maybe we can relax a little bit, leave the laptops in the bag at night some more.
Great, good for you.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's gonna be a lot of changes. I mean, I actually am not going to be working with Drupal nearly as much. Although hopefully I can share a big Drupal-related project that I think I will be working on when I start. So we'll find out. I don't really know what life's going to be like yet.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
And you will become a commuter again.
Yeah, I'm going to be commuting quite a bit. Although after things settle in, I'll be able to work from home 1 or 2 days a week. And then there's, the usual conference madness travel.
Right.
So we'll see.
Well, good. Congratulations, Jason. And also joining us, as usual, is Mr. John Picozzi from Oomph.
It's true. I'm here in our lovely Providence offices. Soon to be moving out of the shipping container building that we currently reside in to a lovely office closer to downtown Providence. So we're all very excited about that.
Lots of changes everywhere.
Looking forward, obviously, to Ellen joining us for the move and our new office space. So a lot of things moving, a lot of things changing, all for the better, which is good. What is not changing is the weather.
The
weather pattern
that is not going away.
Yeah, we can't get through this intro without talking about the weather, right?
I feel like we've been doing our listeners a disservice.
That's true.
Weather's fantastic. 75 degrees out.
So for you first-time listeners, if you're tuning in today for the first time on episode 85, we are all based in New England. So we've had, when you turn on the Weather Channel and they're pretty much covering things going on where you live, it's not good. So that's what's happening with us right now.
I've
Just
been
got lots of
bringing
stuff.
Forget the Weather Channel. How about NBC National, CNN, Fox,
Right, exactly.
especially Fox?
What's the guy's name? Jim Cantori? Is that his name? Does anyone know who I'm talking about? The guy from the Weather Channel that's always in the action of
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, Jim Cantori. So if he's nearby, you know you're in trouble. So anyway, so also we have Nick Laughlin, who's going to be flying home from San Diego tonight and shoveling or trying to find his car is buried in his driveway. Is that right, Nick?
I'm not looking forward to the shoveling. Luckily, we're on the end of the street, so it should be pretty easy for us to find the cars. But yeah, I've enjoyed about a week away from the weather. I think there's about 2.5, 3 feet of snow on my cars, though. So it's time to get back, get used to the snow and the cold again.
I see you sporting a new haircut too.
Yeah, I got a haircut the first day here. Felt it was too shaggy for 70s,
Is that what that's what a San Diego haircut looks like?
Yeah.
So what's the laughing about, boys? John's just shaking his head. All right, so how about if we get into the topic today? And I'm Stephen Cross, by the way, if you're a first-time listener. So let's talk about the flag module. We don't really take whole shows often and talk about modules. We might be doing that a little bit more in the future. But it's so versatile. There's lots of things you can do with it. I was trying to look up. Did I paste the numbers in here? Maybe I didn't paste them in the show notes. I think it's got about 50,000 installs, somewhere around that number. I seem to recall looking at it earlier. So it's relatively popular. Yeah, 47,000 is reporting on Drupal.org. So, what is the flag module?
Well, basically, at its simplest, it's just a way to store a connection. And basically, what you're doing is, when creating a flag, you're saying that a user can mark a piece of content. Generally, I mean that's pretty much what it comes down to, and you can set that to be acting on things tied to more than just the fact that it's a node. It could be it could be restricted by content type. It could be restricted by organic groups. There's a few ways that you can sort of narrow it down and use that flag as a number of different. You can act on it a number of different ways. You can tie it into rules. So it's just something that is like a marker that's stored, tied to that user and that piece of content or that thing, that entity.
So when you say
Yeah.
user, does it require someone? Does a flag module require someone having a user account, or does it work with anonymous users?
No, it will work with anonymous users. I mean, it's sort of subject to the same caveats of any other kind of anonymous user stuff in Drupal. It has to work with cookies and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I don't think it necessarily has to be tied to one specific user either. You can
It's true.
sort of have global flags as well. If it's in a moderation capacity, if one user marks it as spam, every moderator that looks at it will see it has been marked as spam. But I also believe that you can tie it specifically to a user per entity. So if it's more of a rating type thing or a liking type thing, then each individual user has to mark it and toggle it.
Yeah, so it's an interesting module with a lot of versatility. What are some of the ways that you guys have used the flag module?
We've used it in a basic favoriting functionality. We had a site that had user accounts. Each user had their own account, and they would look at content, and as they were going through, they could say, "Oh, this is a favorite of mine," and then conversely, they'd be able to go into their account and view all of their favorites. So anything that they flagged as a favorite, there was a view that they could go in and then filter that down. Additionally, down to like most recent or alphabetical or whatever the extra filter they wanted to add would be.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that one of the real strengths of Flag is that it's exposed to views and it's exposed to rules. So that combination can give you some pretty powerful things that you can do to interact with that content. So like list of favorites, list of bookmarks, favorite places on a website.
Yeah, and it's very powerful. I mean, one of the ways that I tend to use it more often is with spam or moderation, when there's not a really extremely defined workflow, but there's an approval process, setting it up so that a moderator can come through and approve something just by clicking a button, or mark something as spam with just a click of a button is extremely handy. And with rules, you can you can do things like, when somebody flags something, it publishes the content, changes the value, and then resets the flag. So you can kind of have, you can have one-click trigger actions that are repeatable if necessary, and it's very useful. And one thing a lot of people kind of new to Flag sometimes get hung up on is it's very, on the surface, it looks very much like a Boolean or like a checkbox. You can very easily have a checkbox that marks something as a favorite, and if it's been marked as a favorite, then it shows up somewhere else. The two key differences, though, are, and probably one of the more important differences, is Flag exposes a toggle that you don't have to go to the edit screen to view. And you can style that button to look like whatever action you're taking.
So, Nick, give some examples of what you mean by that.
So, for example, going back to the spam thing, you can have a list of content, and there can just be a link with a button underneath that says mark this as spam. And when you click that, it'll toggle and say it's been marked as spam, rather than having to click edit, go into the thing, mark it as spam, hit save.
Yeah,
it's generally just an Ajax.
I think an easier way to say or to articulate what Nick's saying there is, it's more of a UI thing than it is an actual like admin thing. Granted, you can use it for anonymous users or logged in users, but it's not something that they have to go to the edit screen for. It's something that they can use on the what would be perceived as the front end of the site or the user-facing end of the site.
Right. So it's not necessarily about editing the
Ajax,
content.
so like an Ajax type update?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's an option. I mean, it doesn't have to, so it does
to.
fall back nicely to just a simple page reload.
Right.
Yeah, as opposed to something where on like the edit screen you might add a on-off switch or a checkbox. Flag kind of has a similar set of functionality, but without that single checkbox on that single piece of content. Something to also articulate there is it's making a relationship between the user and the content that they've flagged, so that way you can use a user-specific flag in a view and that sort of thing, as opposed to if you were to add a checkbox to your content type, that's only for that piece of content, not necessarily for that user interacting with that piece of content.
Yeah. So that's where you can get into doing some pretty interesting things, like if you're building a forum, like we talked about last week, you can add something to flag this content as inappropriate. So if you want to add some moderation, and then you can assign permissions to who can do that. Can any user flag something as inappropriate, or do you want to set up a community moderator role and only allow those people to do it? And then in your views, you can tie it in, and you could even do some things like, if a piece of content has more than X number of flags assigned to it saying that it's inappropriate, you could set a threshold and say if 3 people have flagged this as inappropriate, then don't display it. So there's some interesting things you can do there by sort of aggregating user input in their clicking on something to mark it in some way or another, or favoriting it. So if lots of people have favorited this same piece of content, create a view that shows content that has the most flags.
Yep.
So like there's some pretty neat things you can do in that context. And the other thing that we did with it most recently was actually use it to build a notification system. So people could, we created the flag assigned to a group, and so when you're in that group and you wanted to receive email notifications when new content was posted in that group, you just click that link. It's a little Ajax thing, and it switches the text to say, subscribe to this content or unsubscribe. And anytime new content of the types that we decided were appropriate is added in that group, there's a rule that checks to see all the people who have flagged that group, loops through, and announces this piece of content via email. So we built something that would allow us to really completely tailor the structure and the content of the email message going out and send it out to anybody who has asked to be notified. And we did not have to add the overhead of more messaging modules. We could do it just with rules and the flag module itself.
Yeah, and each flag that you add,
except that you don't also have some of the features of what some of those notification modules give you, like
Well,
queuing and letting the user determine intervals that they receive messages, digest format. I mean,
that's true, except the notifications module really has nowhere near the same functionality in D7 as it had in D6. So all of the formatting of the body of the messages of all those different types of notifications completely went away. And you'd have to find some way to try and do all of that in code.
That's why you should be using subscriptions.
Well, they all have their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. Right.
The reason we went with this was it gave us the simplest user interface, and we were able to tailor the messaging exactly the way we wanted it to go, and anywhere up to a couple thousand subscribers, we haven't had any performance issues.
Mm-hmm.
So it has limits, but it was really flexible in terms of how we wanted to set it up.
One of the other really cool things about Flag is each time you add a new one, you get that new trigger in the rules. You get that new permissions line. So you can get very granular with which kinds of users you can interact with the flags and how their interaction is reacted. So, for example, if a user of one role marks something as spam and they're a moderator, then it just you can have it set to automatically remove that content. But if an anonymous person marks it as spam, then it sends an email to a moderator saying, hey, you need to check this piece of content. So you get a lot of control over what happens when somebody interacts with the website. And it's really just a streamlined way of allowing your users to interact with pieces of content. So, and you can have different flags for a piece of content. You could have something, you could combine all three of the pieces that we've mentioned. You could have notify me, you could have mark as spam, you could also have favorite separately on the same piece of content, and somebody can interact with it how they see fit. So it's very, very flexible.
So one thing I wanted to note in what I had described was that we also added an organic groups integration for the flag module in order to tie the flag not only to the kind of content and the user, but the specific group that content was in. There are a bunch of useful additional modules that can tie into the flag module to extend its usefulness.
Did that give you more permissions control on the group roles page, or something else?
It was it was a way for us to tie the flag to not just a content type but a specific group. And just we needed that extra level of filtering down so that you don't end up getting content of the same type that's been added to a different group. So we wanted to make sure that we were tying it into the group context for what you were looking at, and then be able to test against group membership. So somebody can't subscribe to content in a group that they don't belong to.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. So, are there any caveats here on the module? Things, warnings, things to think about when not to use it, when it's not appropriate? Anyone think of anything in that area? And then the second part of that is, what are some of the alternatives to using the flag module, other than sort of writing a lot of stuff yourself?
Well, I think, the flag module is effectively a Boolean choice. It's on or it's off. So if you need degrees of on or off,
right,
like if you're trying to rate content rather than just give it a thumbs up or thumbs down, then you would want to look at something like 5-star.
Or even thumbs up and thumbs down, you have difficulty doing unless you default to one or the other.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could, by default, you could do that, or you could create a thumbs up flag and a thumbs down flag.
So there's an interesting question there on the implementation of flags. So if no one flags anything, is there an assumption that there is a flag status?
Well, that's just so there's if there's it's either flagged or not. So if you unflag it, it removes that record. So it is kind of an on or off state.
So it's not necessarily that there's a record there. So if I install the flag module now for a site that I have running, it's not going and creating off flags for everything.
Correct.
But
there's no notion of an off flag. It's just, is there a flag or not?
Okay, so any of the interfaces and views or rules is treating it that it's not flagged if there's no flag attached to it. So it's a 0.
Yeah. And a solution to what I had just mentioned and what Jason had said is you could have one flag that's for thumbs up and one flag that's for thumbs down. And then this would be a case where you'd need a rule that if somebody clicks thumbs up, it then goes and checks the thumbs down flag and unsets it. And if somebody clicks thumbs down...
So you have two flags.
Right.
Yeah.
You really have a thumbs up flag and a thumbs down flag.
Yeah, because if you just have both and no rule to interact, then somebody could both thumbs up and thumbs down one piece of content. So you need to.
So that's an interesting use of multiple flags on the same node.
Yeah.
There's a thumb up and a thumb down.
Yeah.
Well, I would suppose in that.
That's a really wonky way you could have a rating system as well. Although I wouldn't recommend.
Yeah, talk
star 1 flag, star
like
2 flag, star 3 flag.
Yeah, and I mean,
but that's just it. There is a rating module, and there's 5-star, and there's thumbs up, thumbs down. So I mean, there are, for those particular use cases, there are more appropriate solutions. But
yeah, and sometimes. So, for example, I have a client that has voting on their website. They use the voting API and they use rate, and it really is just either you like it or you don't. But it's just easier because it does a lot of stuff like tallying. It handles a lot of caching better. So I use the rate module in that particular case, and somebody says they like something, and it says now 285 people have liked this piece of content. And if you remove it, then it's like, okay, 284. Right. And another one of the reasons why we use that as opposed to, and here's another differentiation when you're using flag versus rate or something like that, is if you're exposing it to the public, you need some bot protection because bots will like to come through and click every link that's available. And if you don't have something that's determining the person clicking whether they're real or not, then you'll get an inordinate number of flags in unsets. So you either need it protected behind the sign-on or some kind of protection.
So Nick, on the website for Mass Innovation, Mass Innovation Nights, it's called, right? Mass Innovation Nights. There's a what's that?
mass.innovationnights.com.
Okay. There's a rating system on there. I'm sorry. There's a voting system. Is that using flags or is it using something else?
It's using rate and voting API.
Okay. All right.
Mostly for the bot protection as well as the automatic tallying.
Okay. Because the flag could work for that same kind of thing.
Yeah, the flag could work there as well. But one of the, as I said, one of the main issues is it doesn't, at least that I've seen, it doesn't have a good way of determining if the anonymous person clicking is a bot or not. And voting API as well as rate integrates very well with a service that checks, the IP and the behavior, IP address and the behavior of the person clicking the link. And it's done a very good job of preventing spam voting.
Although we did notice that when we were trying to vote for food trucks since we were all on our home network, only one of us could vote until we actually went to it on our phones.
Yeah, that's one of the major limitations. It's IP based, but that's really one of the only ways you can prevent anonymous people from voting hundreds of times is by IP. So if you're on the same network and you have the same external IP, there's a limitation. So there's definitely things to consider. Flag doesn't have that limitation, but you're also much more likely to get, hundreds of thousands of votes. So.
Okay. Anything else with the flag that anyone wants to bring up before we move on to a few other topics?
Just again, really think of it as a Boolean, but a Boolean that's exposed to the front end. When I first was trying to use it, I just kept going back to using a Boolean, and then when I realized that it was kind of a toggle that people could access without having to edit it, and you could tie that specific toggle to the user, that's when I started to realize how powerful it was. It's an extremely versatile module, very useful.
And I feel like there's a use case that I used it for in the past 6 months. I cannot it was a very odd situation, and it just worked perfectly, and I cannot remember what it is that I did that with. So there's probably lots of use cases out there of implementing a flag to do something other than the obvious, hey, I like this functionality. So
one other, actually, it just reminded me, there's one other interesting use case that I've had for it, and it was kind of a compromise. So many times moderators will have a view that shows 20, 30, 40, 50 pieces of content that need to be approved, and something like views bulk operations is very good for that. You can check off the ones you need to, or you can check off the whole page and you can say publish. But one thing that doesn't, it's a kind of a hassle to do with views bulk operations is if you need to publish one at a time or maybe just two, then you're checking them off, you're selecting the action, you're hitting publish, and you're confirming it, that kind of stuff. So you're using a combination of flag with views bulk operations you can give people a button that says, publish this, but if they're doing 10 at a time, they can use views bulk operations. So it gives people kind of an alternate path, and they can choose which is better for them, either just clicking a button after reviewing it, or saying, I know all the person that wrote all these 5, they're going to be fine, and they can just select 5. So it's good to do single tasks very quickly as well.
All right, let's move on to our module of the week. We have field tools. I think that was Nick who put this in here.
Yep, this is my module of the week. So field tools is a module that I can never remember the name of. So I always have to send an email to the person who introduced it to me first. It's one of those modules that you probably don't use too often, but when you do, it's incredibly useful. What it does is it gives you an additional tab on the content type form, and it allows you to copy fields between entities extremely easily. So you can, if you have a content type that has 10, 15 fields on it, and you need to clone pretty much all of them to another one, or make a new. You can go to that screen. You check off the 10 or 15 fields that you need. You choose which node to send it to, and you hit save. And 3 seconds later, the other content type has those 15 fields. You can also pull. So like if you have a content type that you need to pull, a field from 5 different content types, and you need to add it to it, you can go there and you can say, I need to add these fields to this content type, and you just choose all the fields.
That's a really interesting, and it's in alpha, but it's not as big a deal because you can kind of just turn that on in development and then turn it off.
Yeah, it's something that you use, and but it saves so much time. I mean, you can clone a content type in about 5 seconds. And it works well with things like field collections and paragraph. One limitation I've seen so far is it doesn't do field groups. But I'd much rather have to go and create a couple field groups again than create 25 fields. So it's a very useful module. But again, I always forget what it's called. So hopefully now
Field tools.
I'll never forget.
It's for any new listeners, we have a page on our website, talkingdrupal.com. That's module of the week, and we have a summary in there. So if you know that you heard of something and you can't remember what episode you heard it on, and it was a module of the week, if you go to that one page, we summarize all of our modules that we've talked about in the module of the week segment. So it's a very handy page. It's certainly useful for us every Wednesday when we're trying to figure out what have we talked about and what we haven't. We can go to that page and look there. So it's a great resource for you. And then we link you to the episode if you want to go listen to what we had to say about it.
Yeah, it's definitely been. I mean, for me, this is the great thing is at least half of the ones that you guys have come up with I've never heard of, which is that's what I love about it. I mean, I'm always learning new useful little tools.
Like Nick is talking about this one today, and last night I was just manually typing in 10 fields from one content type into a second one, and this would have been perfect if I had known about this 24 hours ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to bundle copy, but it takes out the whole export the code, import the code piece. I mean, it's just a bunch of check boxes.
Right. And actually, bundle copy does go down to the field level too, so I could have used that. Right?
Yeah, true.
All right, there's one more thing I want to mention, and I'm going to put the link in the show notes, but if you go to Drupal Easy podcast, they just recently talked about the flag module as well. They had one of the developers on their show.
Oh, cool.
I'm not sure if it was the last episode or the previous episode, but I know I listened to it in the past week. So there's some more information out there about the flag module, and really they talked a little bit about what's happening in Drupal 8, which was they expect that when Drupal 8 releases, all of the functionality that the flag module will have that it has today, they expect to be ready in Drupal 8 when Drupal 8 releases.
Awesome.
Which is great news.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very useful module. That'll be good.
Okay, one last thing before we close out. We have on our list here Drupalcon Bogota. Does anyone have any information? I know none of us went there, but does anyone have any insight into what went on there? I think, Nick, you might have a few comments.
Yeah, I listened to the keynote. It was pretty good. He spoke a little bit about
who gave the keynote?
Kind of expanded on Dries. And then I think Larry Garfield gave the keynote for the second day. So, I mean, he expanded on what he spoke about in Austin. It's pretty interesting. Kind of talked about where he thinks the internet's going, and then talked a little bit about Drupal 8. But it was pretty good. It was kind of interesting. A couple questions came in Spanish, and he didn't quite have an idea what they were saying, so it kind of brought up the whole multilingual aspect of the internet community. But it was pretty good.
That was one of the things that was really impressive, the way they handled English and Spanish translation in all the sessions. It was really well done. basically they had simultaneous, whatever language you were presenting in, they would have somebody to translate it to the other language, one of the two, live during the session. So I saw a lot of positive tweets about that.
Like the UN?
No. Just like that.
Interesting.
So someone said no. I don't know who that was, but that's fine.
Some random naysayer in John's office. Keep him on mute.
So Nick, where did you find that video? Did you go to the Drupal Association channel on YouTube?
No? I got it from Twitter. Webchick tweeted it the other day. I'll grab that link in
the show notes. Yeah, I'm looking for it right now. I think the association has a channel on YouTube that most of that stuff shows up in. All right, excellent. So, any closing reminders as we leave? Things going on?
Well,
shovel snow with your knees.
Yeah. Lift with your knees when you're moving all that snow.
Right.
The next foot that's coming over the weekend.
Right.
Well, just one more reminder for the responsive design and typography workshop I'm doing in Boston on March 21st. There's still a few super early bird tickets left, and I think that's after that the price goes up a little bit. So pretty excited about that. Webcoffee.co if you want to find out more about that.
Excellent. Anyone else with anything? If not, we'll move right to our goodbyes. So, Jason Pimental, where can people find you online if they want to congratulate you on your recent changes for your new job?
You can find me at jpimentel on all the social networks and LinkedIn and all of that, and you will be able to find me now at freshtilledsoil.com in Watertown, Massachusetts.
Excellent. Good luck, Jason.
Thanks.
And we don't know if we can expect to hear you on the show next week or not. We're going to play that by ear, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm really hopeful. They also have another really good show that they record there too, so they've got actually a pretty good room in which I could be if I can work it out. So
I would have expected that would have been one of the key criteria for selecting a position, but that's just my opinion.
Bargaining chip.
Every opinion counts.
Should have been the largest bargaining chip.
So, John, how about you?
You can find me on all the social networks at John Picozzi and always on at umfink.com.
Steve did a really good stand-in for your outro last week. It worked out pretty well.
Yeah, you left before the show ended, and I think it was Nick.
I think
yeah, we did the outro for you, John.
I'm gonna go look that up now.
Okay.
And send nasty grams to both of you.
No, I was nice. Don't worry.
No, we said exactly what you just said. How about you, Nick?
You can find me online at Nixvan, Nicxvan, and for the next few hours in sunny, warm San Diego, and tomorrow depressed in the cold 16,000 feet of snow of New England. So flying tonight, probably be tired tomorrow morning, but good week here. See you guys next week.
Excellent.
See you, Nick. Safe travels.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So we'll see you next week. And I'm Stephen Cross at Stephen Cross or parallaxinfotech.com. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Cheers, everyone.
Take care.